What is up? Welcome to a very special episode of the DFS Academy. We are covering the Thanksgiving main slate. Happy Thanksgiving to those who celebrate. Happy Football Thursday that those that don't. Let's build some lineups. Happy Thanksgiving. Welcome to a special episode of the DFS Academy. I am your host, Ryan Weiss. With me, as always, Austin Mandolia. How are you tonight, my friend? Our first ever recording on a Monday night episode, I'm pretty sure. So.
Yeah, I'm honestly pumped for this. I love the Thursday slate. What's funny is I'll be interested actually if any of the people I'm celebrating Thanksgiving with this year also play DFS or sports bet, because typically I am like with my partner's family and they're not really they don't sports bet, at least that I'm aware of. And so I'm always like quietly like checking my phone in the corner, seeing how my lineups are doing, but like in a very chill way. And it'll be interesting to see. Do I have people that I can like split my lineups with this year besides all of our great listeners?
Yeah, say in the Discord, and let's get that out of the way. You'll find a link in the description of this video. Join the Discord completely free. Happy to celebrate Thanksgiving with each and every one of you. Austin, I was given a surprise. I feel like I've played on Thanksgiving before, but maybe not this strategy. The Millie Maker for Thanksgiving is a $5 entry. Are you kidding me? And Austin just found out a few moments ago I had some nice bets this week. I'm up well over $100. Austin, I might go crazy with some multi-lineup building in the Millie Maker this week. $5? Are you kidding me? To win $1 million?
Yeah, you typically put in one $20 one, so you could get four.
I'm at least doing four, without a doubt. So,
and you should think about it. I've run into this with you before where I say, oh, there's this great promo in DraftKings, and then it turns out it was just for me.
You didn't get it.
But
or I didn't get it, rather.
Everybody should have gotten this one. Hopefully, you should check your DraftKings lineup. There's essentially a free entry. It's for the Millie. If you opt in, you get your token. You enter the Millie Maker and you lose, you get your $5 back. So,
yeah, I'll make sure I go in and opt in on that, because I've built my number one lineup that I'll share later on in the show, but I'm going to build at least 3 more lineups. I want to build something around the quarterbacks, and I even have ideas for our current lineup. But if you were not aware, there are a number of ways you'll be able to play on Thanksgiving's games. This show is mainly going to focus as treating it as a 3-game main slate, but you can get into Showdown. We are not going to focus on the Showdown aspect. How we are going to do this show is we are going to break down each game, tell you some of the players we like, tell you if we think any of these guys are traps. But Austin, with you being kind of my go-to DFS guy, again, I don't think I've been as active on Thanksgiving as I have the normal Sunday main slate. How do you, as someone who manages bankroll and takes this a bit more seriously than most, how do you attack a day like this where we have 3 really good games and you can treat them as one slate?
Yeah, I have a few things that I go after. First off, I play a lot more tournaments for the Thanksgiving slate than I do any other time of the year. Not necessarily that I'm playing more, I'm laying more cash than I typically would. But on a regular main slate contest where you have between 7, 8, 9, and 14 games, I'm usually putting 80% of my fees into cash, the other 20% into tournaments. For Thanksgiving, I only play tournaments, because the thing with cash when it's that big of a slate is you really have to hit the chalk. There's going to be some heavy chalk in this cash contest, and I like leaning into the variance of these smaller slates. And so sometimes I'll even play, like during the regular season, I'll play like the Monday night, Thursday night contest where it's just 2 games.
Do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun ways you could do this. And so sometimes I'll do that because, again, you're only picking from 4 teams in that situation, and there's a lot of different ways that can go. And so it's easy to play a little bit more in the game theory, which is also why I like Showdown contests. So that's kind of one of the first things is I play more tournaments whenever it comes to the Thanksgiving slate. Some key things to consider, and Ryan, you just have to interrupt me on some of these because I have a lot of things I can talk about.
No, here's the thing. We started it's called DFS Academy for a reason. We are here to help you folks hopefully get better at DFS. And Austin, I mean, I learn every time we talk about something on this show. So I'm probably not going to interrupt you a lot. I'm going to let you go on your little ramble here, and then we'll get into some of these games. So.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, another thing that I think is really important to remember for the smaller contests is for the fewer games on a slate is you can actually have some misses and be just fine in some of these contests. Like if you're playing in the Millie Maker on Sundays, you need all of your players to score 20, 30 plus points in order to win $1 million. On the Thanksgiving slate, you can get away with a little bit less. You can have a player that only scores 10 points, and it's fine because there's just fewer players to go around. So
I was going to say, it seems like this is going to sound ridiculous. It seems like it's unlikely the perfect lineup is even possible to build because the salaries are such and the player pool is so small. It's unlikely anyone is building the perfect lineup because the perfect lineup is probably Rashee Rice, Jahmyr Chase, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're going to have to play some like gross receiver or some gross running back that probably only scores you 10, 15 points. And it's okay. So when you're watching the games and that happens, just know it's a thing. But in terms of the roster build strategy, the first thing I really want to highlight is you just need to be willing to break some of the rules that you typically would have in place for a DFS contest. So, for example, like we don't usually play running backs from the same matchup in our main slate contest because the game script where those two running backs get there is just so unlikely to happen. It's more likely that two running backs from different games are going to be optimal, but in this kind of context, like you have 4 teams in here that I think could end up slinging the ball a ton. And so there is a world where Emmanuel Wilson and Jahmyr Gibbs are the 2 running backs that you needed, and then you needed pass catchers from other games. So things like that, playing a defense, even though you have a player from the opposing team in your lineup, it's going to be harder to avoid doing that. And so you need to be comfortable with some things like that.
Yeah, and so I'll get to the route I decided to take on defense when we get to that game, but I agree with that completely. It's almost inevitable. You're essentially for the million, you're praying you pick the one of these 6 defenses that gets 10 sacks or scores a touchdown on a kick return this week. So.
Exactly, and I have some ideas about which defense you can play, which we'll get into it in a second. Another thing that I love though about these contests, and another thing to keep in mind is like. We've talked a little bit the past couple of weeks on the main show about Onslaught stacks because playing, I haven't seen the Millie Maker winner from yesterday yet, but from 2 weeks ago, they had Jacoby Brissett, Greg Dortch, Michael Wilson, and Trey McBride. The week before that, it was also an Onslaught. I can't remember what team it was, but there was like 3 or 4 players from the same team that were in that Millie Maker winner. That's going to be a viable strategy for these smaller contests as well, because in a situation like this where you have fewer teams, like you could have one game that just pops off and scores, like hits the over, hits 55 total points scored in the game. And so all of the fantasy action is happening in that matchup. And then another game just dud and you needed actually nobody from that matchup. So be willing to play like 5 players from the same matchup. I'm not going to be surprised to see that. I'm not going to bat an eyelash at anybody doing that here because that's one way that you're going to get different. Because the thing about this, and this actually gets into one of my last points, like you're going to play some chalk. It's just going to happen. If you play Rashee Rice, he might be a really good play. He might also be 60% rostered. And so the way that you're going to have to get different is not just like figuring out who to save money with, but how you build your roster. People don't want to play 5 players from the same game or 6 players from the same game. It starts to feel queasy because you think too many things have to go the right direction. But it's actually a really easy way to get variance and to get different in these lineups. So again, this is why I love these smaller contests is you don't always have to play the right players necessarily and be focused on player takes. You can be focused on thinking about how are you going to build your roster in a way that is different than what the field is going to want to do.
Yep, 100% agree with all that. My lineup is very much focused on nobody wants to play 4 players from the same team, so that's what makes me different this week, and that's kind of how I leaned into it. I love all of that, Austin, and again, we'll be able to break down my lineup a little bit later. I wanted you got to you're going to have some chalk. I want to go up one because I was confused about this a little bit myself. When you say you play in 3 max contests, are you saying 3 people or 3 max entry? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, 3 max entry. And it's just to say, like, for this type of situation, I love the multi-entry contest where you can have, or when you have fewer games on the slate.
Okay.
It's something that I like to do during the playoffs as well. But this is another good chance for doing it. For me, I'm going to be playing those 3 max enter because I'll have 3 contests built around 3 different teams, essentially. But if you have the bankroll to do 20 max enters, this is the type of situation where it's easier to me to be able to play a 20 max enter contest when there's only 3 games to look at, because I'm only having to have takes on those 3 games, as opposed to a main slate where there's 10 to 12 games that I have to be keeping in mind and thinking about and building around. I much prefer it when there's fewer contests. And so I'm actually more willing to play those higher max entry contests when there are fewer games to pick from.
I don't think I could do it. 20 lineups. I feel like I would end up duplicating a lineup and just having players in one in the flex and not in the flex. And I haven't done that enough to know if it would tell me I was doing that. And then I'm just giving money away. No, thank you. I couldn't do 20, but I'm going to do the 3 this week, Austin. As I mentioned, the Millie Maker's cheaper. So I'm building 4 lineups for the Millie Maker anyway, but now I'll look into some of these contests that are 3 max enters and send my 3 best lineups and see how they handle. So
yeah, there you go. There also, you can find some 5 max enters and some 7 max enters. So you can get a little bit in between the 3 and the 20.
Thanksgiving's opening up a whole new thing for me this year. It's going to be a fun one. I'll probably be dead broke by the time it's done. Joking. I'm not that degenerate. Austin, let's get into the first game. If you've never watched Thanksgiving before, Detroit is always the team to kick us off. It is Green Bay visiting the Detroit Lions. Detroit is a 3-point favorite. The over-under on this game, Austin, is 49.5. All of these have great over-unders. Detroit's implied total is just over 26 points. Green Bay's implied total is just over 23 points. For our show sheet, Austin, I've listed you all the main players and the salaries for those players. We haven't really discussed how we're going to handle this show. You have some great notes for the game, but let's just go. Let's just talk about this game in general. I think this is a game. It's easy to say this is a game worth attacking. I think they're probably all worth attacking, but I do think that this game could easily, I feel like everything could easily be the highest scoring game. We're talking about 3 games. This is my first time doing a show like this, folks. I'm going to sound like an idiot. So I'll let Austin jump in here so I sound less dumb.
I think what you're getting at is really important. All 3 of these games, and I think it's worth, we're going to go game by game, but I think it's worth just highlighting all 3 games off the top. So this game has a 49.5 point over under. The other 2 games both are at 52.5. Yeah. So they're all projected to be fairly high scoring, but this is, I would say, the least appealing of the 3. Ironically,
and nobody has an implied total under 22 points. This is a really good Thanksgiving slate.
Yeah, it is a really good Thanksgiving slate. It's really fun that we get to see a bunch of we get to see some division rivals. We get to see some high flying offenses. It's really perfect matchup. The thing that I am intrigued about is I think this game goes under rostered, particularly for the quarterbacks. I think that in general, I am fascinated by playing Jordan Love this year. I think that people are going to want to play Mahomes. They're going to want to play Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson. We're going to get to Joe Burrow in a little bit. I think Jordan Love is going to go overlooked. I think Jared Goff might go overlooked. So I'm comfortable with both quarterbacks, but I'm particularly comfortable with Love because the Green Bay Packers defense has been really stingy against opposing quarterbacks, and the Detroit Lions defense has not been.
Yeah. I love the quarterbacks in this matchup. I was going to jump ahead. Let's stick with the quarterbacks. I think you have hit a nail on the head, mainly because Jameis Winston just put in work against this Detroit defense. It's a defense that can get beaten, and I believe Love is the cheapest quarterback on the slate, and it's not particularly close. That gives you a lot of freedom to do some really other cool stuff with your lineup.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. The other thing that I want to point out about quarterbacks here that I think is really helpful to highlight is the fact that oftentimes in these small slates, there will be a quarterback that gets really steamed up, that is really popular, and they end up more often than not being a quarterback that fails on the slate. So I want to go and look back at last year for just a hot second for last year's Thanksgiving slate. Last year, I'm going to get to it eventually on Pro Football Reference. Last year, the Chicago Bears played the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
The Dallas Cowboys played the New York Giants, and the Green Bay Packers played the Miami Dolphins. Of the quarterbacks in those matchups, Dak Prescott, very popular.
Yeah.
Jared Goff, very popular.
Especially last year. He was on fire last year. So
especially last year. Jordan Love, very, very popular. I mean, he was still looked on more favorably than at least Tua Tagovailoa and Caleb Williams at the time, right? The optimal quarterback last year on Thanksgiving was Tua Tagovailoa. When was the last time we said Tua Tagovailoa was the guy you needed? Like, it's just in these small slates, things like that happen. Things fluctuate a lot. And so I feel like the quarterbacks in this slate, I think they're going to be the guys that get overlooked. And so I think one of them, actually, there's a good chance they're the difference maker you need.
Austin, I'm concerned at running back, and it's a weird concern. Jahmyr Gibbs may become the closest I've ever seen to 100% rostered. He is coming off of the greatest fantasy performance of the 2025 season, and now he is kicking off the Thanksgiving games. I don't see many people building a lineup without him. We've talked about this on the show a lot. Is he the good chalk? Do you just have to eat this because you don't want to be the idiot who doesn't get 52 points out of him?
I think it really depends on salary and where you're at. If you can afford him and still build a lineup you like, I'm going to have a lineup with him in it. And I think that it's fine to play there. And I think if you are feeling nervous about the rostership, but you don't want to miss out on him, you can play him, eat the chalk, and then still play David Montgomery, because that's going to be, again, a way that people don't want to build their lineup. They're going to say it's going to be Jahmyr Gibbs or it's going to be David Montgomery. The Green Bay Packers have not allowed other teams to pass the ball very well. Yeah. It could be a running back game. If Detroit decides they're going to get out and just manhandle everyone while they're at home, like, I could see this being both a Gibbs and Monty game. But I will say, like, don't be afraid to get off of Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, he is going to be super chalk, and you should play him and lean into that. But you also need to have a lineup or two sprinkled in where you're not relying on him, because if you're in a contest where he is 60% rostered and you're the one that decides to go a different route and Gibbs doesn't get there, because at 8,800, like, he still needs to score you 24, 25, 26 points for you to feel really comfortable about him being in your lineup. And so I think it's totally fine to not play him, but it's really hard to argue against. The thing I do worry about is that he maybe gets a little bit game scripted out, but even then, like, he's going to be involved in the pass game. So it's hard for me to say he's an auto click, but he's definitely, like, I'm only going to be not playing him when my roster is telling me a very specific story that, like, this game in general doesn't get there from a points perspective. Like, I'm saying this game scores like 17-10 and Dallas
destroys everybody's Thanksgiving at 12 o'clock.
Exactly. That's kind of like how I'm thinking about that.
I think it's fair. I mean, he is by far the most expensive player on the slate, $800 more expensive than Ja'Marr Chase, that we'll talk about later. Like, you are making a conscious decision that Jahmyr Gibbs is your cornerstone. And after week 12, that looks like a really good decision. But when he's soaking up, 12% of your lineup, it makes things a little bit harder. So,
yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm not going to hate on anybody that doesn't play him. And, I think this is the reason I play the 3 max contest, right? Too. So, like, I want to come back to that for a second, because if you play one contest on this slate, and, like, I get it, if that's just the money you have and the money you feel comfortable losing, whatever. But if you play just one contest, then it feels like it puts you in a situation where you're like, I have to only play Jahmyr Gibbs. And that's not good DFS strategy. Yeah. And so by playing in the 3 max center contest, I feel like I open myself up to be a better DFS player by saying I don't have to play Jahmyr Gibbs every time. I might play him 2 of the 3 times, but I don't have to do it every time, because I'm going to get access to him in a different lineup that hopefully, if he pops off, that lineup is popping off.
Yeah. When you look at the wide receivers in this game, Austin, obviously there's Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he is heavily priced, if I'm not mistaken, 3rd highest priced player on the slate. But the other folks in this game are at the interesting price points.
Yeah, this is a weird one. There's a lot of random receivers in here that I'm not sure exactly what to do with. So Jameson Williams, $4,800. That feels a little bit like a steal to me. But again, the Green Bay Packers have been stingy against receivers. But for me, I'm definitely looking at the Green Bay Packers receiver side because I'm really interested in playing Jordan Love. As I mentioned, he is the
Yeah.
cheapest quarterback on the slate at $5,500. And I think you can easily double stack him this week. And I think if you're doing that, you should have at a minimum Christian Watson in your lineup.
Yeah.
The Lions play man coverage at the third highest rate, and Christian Watson is currently the best player for the Green Bay Packers against man coverage. If Tucker Kraft was healthy, it would be Tucker Kraft, and we would be talking about him being the chalky tight end on this slate.
Certainly.
But it's not. So I'm going with Christian Watson, and then outside of that, I'm keeping an eye out for what we get in terms of injury reports for Jaden Reed. His first game back could be an interesting spot to play him. And then I'm interested in punting off with Dontavian Wicks because at $3,400, you don't need that much from him for him to get you there. And again, this is such a cheap stack to go with Love, Watson, and Wicks that combined, they don't have to do that much. And it enables you to then pay up for the likes of Jahmyr Chase, Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice. Like if you start a lineup with those three, it's going to free you up a lot in the rest of the slate to kind of stack some of these other players. So I really like going that route.
If players want to build on this game, I think there is one trap player in this game, Austin, and I truly feel it is Luke Musgrave. Now, I know me saying this is meaning now he's going to score a touchdown this week, but when you look at what the Green Bay tight ends have done, or rather haven't done since they lost Tucker Kraft, it is eye-opening. Musgrave had a decent week 10. This is the game I'm about to describe is the best game a Green Bay tight end has had since they lost Tucker Kraft. 3 catches for 23 yards. If that's his ceiling, Austin, each of the last 2 weeks, he's caught 1 ball. I think he is a trap at folks who are looking at that salary as a way to save elsewhere. Punt and pick someone's backup tight end before you pick Luke Musgrave. Pick one of Green Bay's backup tight ends who have actually been the ones who are scoring touchdowns for them before you go Luke Musgrave. Josh Wiley scored a touchdown in week 11 against the Giants. So.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but I am with you. Like I love me some Luke Musgrave, but I am scared off of him this week as well. I just think the matchup is not good for him. So I will not be playing Musgrave as much as I wish I could in this spot.
Yep. I want to go back to wide receiver because there's one player you touched on him for a second, but I want to know your thoughts on him. Jameson Williams comes off of 2 games ago, a great game, and he's hyper involved in the offense, and we all love him. And what was the most exciting game of the week and a very high scoring game? And obviously Jahmyr Gibbs did a lot of that on his own. Jameson Williams gives a goose egg. At $4,800, he's priced like he gave us a goose egg last week. So they're not overpricing him. But on this slate, he's cheap and he has upside. And Austin, for me in a Millie making contest, that screams the right things, but my goodness, there's a downside as well. So.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating one. I mean, we were talking about our cash contest yesterday before hitting record, and it's hilarious to me. There were cash contests that had Jameson Williams in it, but still cashed, which is annoying as heck to me, given how good lineup I was, and didn't cash. But yeah, it's wild that he dudded yesterday, and it's just like I think he is definitely like he's always worth a tournament play, and I think he's another way to maybe you sprinkle him in with Jahmyr Gibbs to get different. I think the thing that does really concern me here is the matchup is really poor for the Detroit Detroit receivers in general. Green Bay, since week 8, has allowed under 18 points per game to the receiver position, which is just astounding. Now, I do think that there's some worthy context to mention there because their matchups have not been exactly ideal. So they played the Carolina Panthers when Bryce Young was really just not having it. Yet they still lost that game somehow. So that's the wild thing about this team. They played the Philadelphia Eagles. We know all about their drama. The New York Giants just kind of ran all over them. And then the Vikings, JJ McCarthy. So the competition has not been good recently. But even then, on the season, they've only allowed over 300 yards once, and it was against the Dallas 300 pass yards once, and it was against the Dallas Cowboys. So I'm very nervous about the receivers in general. But if you're feeling like you want to build a lineup where you say you have a Detroit line bring back at a receiver, I think Jameson Williams is the rostership percentage way to go, because I think Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to just be more highly rostered.
Yep. And let's talk about the defenses in this game. The highest priced defense on the slate is the Detroit Lions at 3,200. All defenses are relatively packed tight here. Green Bay's at 2,600. Are either of these in your player pool?
Sort of. So I do think the Green Bay Packers are going to be the most highly rostered defense, if I had to guess, because of the matchup, and also because I don't think it's either going to be the Packers or the Ravens, to me, as the most highly rostered, because of who they're going up against and the overall context of those games. I'm usually trying to find ways to get off of the chalky defense in these contests, because defense does start to matter a little bit when you condense the field this way.
Yeah.
So I don't mind playing the Packers. I think that they'll be able to force Jared Goff into enough mistakes, maybe get a sack or two, and it'll work out, especially now that they have Micah Parsons up at full speed. But if I'm like trying to play just pure game theory, it's probably better to go with the Lions defense. But I'm lean towards the Green Bay Packers defense if I'm picking one from this game.
There you go. Austin, any pump plays that I didn't list that you thought maybe people should consider if they're trying to get super weird with their lineup, or any aspect of this game that you did not get a chance to talk about before we move on?
I think it's worth watching the injury report for those Packers receivers, just to see if, right now there are 3 questionable tags. And we also don't know if Jaden Reed is officially going to play.
Yeah.
So you have Jaden Reed still technically on IR, and then Matthew Golden, Dontavian Wicks, and Savion Williams are all questionable right now. So if for some reason all of those guys don't play for some reason, and you end up with Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, your next receiver that would be healthy is Malik Heath.
Yeah.
Which is a wild name to throw out there. But if there's a scenario where truly those 4 other receivers, Reed, Golden, Wicks, and Williams, are out, I think Malik Heath is an interesting player at that point.
I like that. That's a fun one. Thank you. I'm glad I asked that question. Again, we've never done this show before. I guess there's one last thing. I know we're already probably going longer on one game than we thought we were going to. Josh Jacobs misses last week. Emmanuel Wilson does fantastic. Don't know what's going on with Josh Jacobs this week. If Jacobs is healthy, is he in your player pool? Are you avoiding him because of the week off last week? How are you kind of looking at that running back situation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question about whether I would play Josh Jacobs or not if he's healthy. If Jacobs is healthy, I would definitely consider playing him. It's funny, I just assumed that he wouldn't play, and that was probably a bad assumption to make.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily an ideal matchup for Green Bay. I mean, Detroit has allowed less than 18 points per game over the past 4 weeks to the running back position. But what I will say is, if Jacobs sits and Emmanuel Wilson is healthy again, I don't mind people playing Jahmyr, Gibbs, Emmanuel Wilson lineups. Again, back to what we said at the top of the show, you got to be willing to break some rules, and playing those 2 running backs in the same matchup is a totally fine rule to break this week when you have Mahomes going up against Prescott in the afternoon game, and then Lamar Jackson going up against Joe Burrow in the evening game. Like, it makes sense to then just attack the running backs. I do think that will get chalky though.
Oh, I'm willing to. I would put a large sum of money on what the rostership percentages would be if Josh Jacobs is out. For one reason, Austin, we talked about this before the show. Every cashed lineup last week was Jahmyr Gibbs and Emmanuel Wilson, and now you get to play them again against each other. Everybody is clicking start on those 2 players if they can afford it, plain and simple. So
yeah, that's accurate.
Yep. As you pointed out, this game could be a low rostered game, at least for the pass catchers. This next game is not going to be low rostered, probably from any position. We got Kansas City taking on the Dallas Cowboys. That game usually kicks off sometime around 4:00. Kansas City is a 3.5 point favorite, even though they are on the road and not doing well this season. It's actually just wild that they're a 3.5 point favorite after Dallas beats Philadelphia, but that's neither here or there. Tied for the highest over under on the week and on the slate, 52.5 points. Implied points here are Kansas City at 28, Dallas at 24.5. I believe, no, Kansas City is the second highest implied total of the week. Baltimore is the highest implied total. Obviously, Austin, both of these 2 quarterbacks have to be in play. It's just a question of how much chalk are you willing to eat?
Yeah, and it's a question of how do you build around those quarterbacks. So I don't think I need to say too much about Mahomes and Prescott in this situation. I think they'll both be highly rostered, and rightfully so. Like, I will build probably somewhere between 3 and 6 lineups. By the time I'm done with this, I would definitely have a Mahomes and a Prescott lineup thrown in there.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, I know we went over on the first game, but I don't know how much we need to actually say about this next game. It's all pretty cut and dry. So.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely don't need to say too much about the quarterbacks. The question about the quarterbacks is how do you stack around them? Now, before we get into their pass catchers, I think it's worth talking about the running back situation here, specifically for Kansas City, because Isaiah Pacheco, he did have a limited practice last Wednesday, but then ended up not playing this past Sunday. And so there's a question now, is he going to be healthy going into this game on Thursday? And frankly, I kind of don't care. I'm kind of interested in playing Kareem Hunt either way, whether or not Isaiah Pacheco is healthy, because we have seen even when Isaiah Pacheco is healthy, that Kareem Hunt is still the one getting the freaking touches towards the red zone. And that is the thing that has gotten me. Like I've played Kansas City in showdown contest and thought, oh, this is the week to play Rashard Smith. And then Kareem Hunt scores 2 touchdowns. And it's like, okay, well, Kareem Hunt has a very defined role in this offense. And so I think in a situation where people are going to want to play Jahmyr Gibbs, they're going to want to play Emmanuel Wilson if he's there cheap. Kareem Hunt's going to be a really easy pivot, especially because people are going to also look at this game and say, oh, this is a slugfest. We're going to see Mahomes, Prescott throw for 8, 9 touchdowns combined. It's like, well, what if they don't? What if you get some rushing touchdowns?
Well, and I think if you don't follow Kansas City a lot, and I do because I've been a huge Mahomes Kelsey guy since they've joined the league, Kelsey's inefficiency in scoring touchdowns has come to the advantage of Kareem Hunt. Yes. He is the touchdown scorer via the ground or the air. That's a great way to still get a piece of Mahomes. So
yeah, no, I totally feel that. Another note on the running backs. I want to talk about Javonte Williams. I think he's going to be a contrarian play this week. I don't think people are going to want to play him. I don't think you should play him.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you see what they just did to Jonathan Taylor?
Like, yeah, exactly. You saw what they just did to Jonathan Taylor. And it's not just Jonathan Taylor. They've been a tough run defense. It's been their skill. They've been forcing other teams to pass on them. It just hasn't converted to as many wins as they would probably have hoped. So just keep that in mind, that it's going to be tough for Javonte Williams to score on this Kansas City defense. And so because of that, you will probably find some rostership percentage projection out there that'll show that Javonte Williams is like going to be 5% rostered or less. And I think that is the right decision to make. I don't think he should be rostered heavily.
Yep. Austin, if people are avoiding the running backs, either to their advantage or detriment, they are not avoiding the pass catchers. I venture to guess every lineup will have one of these 3 pass catchers in it. Rashee Rice, George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb. And you noticed the very first thing I noticed. CeeDee Lamb is $100 cheaper than George Pickens. And I understand last week Pickens had a game. But CeeDee Lamb is still CeeDee Lamb. And I find it wild that we at least did not price them the same. You are giving me $100 discount on CeeDee Lamb right now.
Yeah, I'm like, I really need to talk to whoever sets these prices, Bill at DraftKings, that is over there just saying like, oh yeah, we're going to put CeeDee Lamb lower than George Pickens. I mean, something is wrong with our algorithm, if you ask me, but whatever. The thing is, like, I think it's going to be one of those situations where people see this and they think, oh, play CeeDee Lamb, don't play George Pickens. And I agree. I feel like that could be a little bit of a mistake. I really think that what CeeDee Lamb being priced down does is it opens up the Dak Prescott double stack where you play Prescott with both CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. Again, I think that will be popular enough that you can't just then build chalk around that. You're going to have to find a piece here or there to still get different. But I don't mind that. I don't, it's kind of the only way I want to double stack Dak Prescott this week. I don't love the matchup for Jake Ferguson. Technically speaking, I think it's like an okay matchup for him against Kansas City, who, let's see, or is my memory serving me correctly?
No, they've over the last 4 games they're giving up 17.8 in DraftKings scoring. So they're
it's even worse.
Matchup, so.
Yeah, it's a decent matchup. The Kansas City is allowed the 5th most points. So like technically it's a good matchup, but it's hard for me to imagine that both George Pickens and Jake Ferguson get there. So I could see doing it here and there, but the double stack I'm really interested in is just go Dak Prescott, George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, and then figure it out from there. I'm not really interested in most of the other cheap receivers in this matchup, just because I feel like on both sides of the ball, they're going to be very unlikely to pop and be optimal. I guess maybe Juju Smith-Schuster at 3K for Kansas City, like he can get there on volume if Xavier Worthy is hurt in particular. But overall, I think from the receiver side, it's Rashee Rice. If you're playing Patrick Mahomes, you should play Rashee Rice, which again, this gets into my last point, because the Dallas Cowboys play zone nearly 80% of the time, which is really good news for Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce.
If you want to know how great it is for Rashee Rice, go watch the 4th quarter of that Indianapolis game where they had kind of went into a zone defense and Rashee Rice had his way with them. So.
Yeah, I know, it was really nice. So I think it sets up really well for the two of them. So I particularly love, if you want to onslaught Patrick Mahomes, Kareem Hunt, Rashee Rice, and Travis Kelce, I think that can get there, because if you imagine a situation where, look, we said Kansas City, they're projected to score 28 points. Kansas City is not out of the woods yet. They still have to win football games to guarantee their playoff spot.
Yeah.
And so Mahomes will be running the ball. But also we could see Kareem Hunt score 2 touchdowns. And then if Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice get their own volume and both of them score a touchdown, like all of a sudden, like those 4 guys are scoring you like 100 points. And like, it doesn't take much to pop in these lineups. Like if you're playing on the main slate, you're used to, you need 260 points to think about winning a Millie Maker. And in this context, like 180 to 200 can win you a tournament really easily.
Yeah. And that didn't even cash in the 50-50 lineups last week because it's ridiculous. Austin, I think you've kind of hit on the tight ends. I think we can kind of move on. I do want to talk about the defenses in this game, because I think it's going to be easy to look at this game and be like, I'm not starting either defense. I personally believe the Kansas City defense might be a bit of a sneaky play this week.
I 100% agree with that. I think they are a very good way to get different in this situation. Because I don't think people are going to want to play it. And if you are onslaught stacking the Chiefs, like their defense probably does well. Yeah. And so, and at least doesn't give up a ton of points. And so I don't mind going that route by any means. And the thing that's nice about there being 6 teams on this matchup is it is possible to build a lineup where you don't have any Dallas Cowboys in it and play the Kansas City Chiefs defense. Yeah. I think it is an interesting spot for them. I also just think from a rostership percentage perspective, I love going that route.
Yeah, what really stood out to me, because if you guys have watched the show for any period of time, you know that I nerd out on the defense is the least important part of your lineup, but I can't help myself. Austin, none of these teams particularly give up a ton of sacks. Like, I was shocked in the last 4 games, Cincinnati isn't even allowing 2 sacks per game with Joe Flacco as their quarterback. And most of these teams are it's 2 to 3 sacks. You're probably not getting there on quarterback sacks this week, a la the Cleveland Browns, who got 10 sacks against the Raiders. This is likely going to be what team turns the ball over. And Dallas over their last 4 games is averaging 2 turnovers a game. If Kansas City or any of these teams takes one of those for a touchdown, it works out really well for you.
Yeah, I think that's really great. You can tell my brain is a little bit funky and broken, because I heard you say that stat about the Bengals only giving up or only allowing 2 sacks the past couple of weeks. I was like, wait, so are you telling me that Joe Burrow is the reason they give up sacks all the time?
Yes. No, it is. Austin, we've probably never talked about this on the show. Jason Wood, very smart human being for football guys, knows football far better than I do, has contended since I've worked with him. Sacks are a quarterback stat, and there's a reason Joe Burrow gets sacked as much as he does. He holds the damn ball too long because he thinks he's a hero. So
yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, and that may come into play in the very next game.
Speaking of,
let's wrap this slate up. The late game, I believe, is an 8 o'clock kickoff. I could be wrong there. 8:30. Cincinnati at Baltimore. This is the strangest game on the slate. Baltimore, who has not played that great, is a 7.5 point favorite, but the over-under is 52.5. The implied total here is Baltimore 30 points, by far the highest on the slate. Cincinnati 22.5. Austin, I'm going to jump right in and skip over your question. You ask about Burrow. I want to start with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson looks unable or unwilling to run the football and has thrown one touchdown, I think, in his last 3 games. Of all of the quarterbacks on the slate, I know you have in here in your notes, you think there's home for a Lamar stack. If I'm leaving one quarterback out of my lineup building, Austin, it's Lamar Jackson.
Oh, interesting. Well, that makes me feel a little bit more excited about playing him.
Yeah.
Because, well, and that's the thing I'm curious about. I don't have a good read for this context of, are people going to say, look at what Lamar did last week, he's broken, and not play him, and therefore he's a great play? Yeah, like, is that going to be the consensus? And so he's a great play because people are not going to want to start him. I mean, that was the Tua Tagovailoa situation last year. Nobody wanted to play him. He was broken last year, and he ended up being optimal. But I can't decide if that's the case, or if people are going to say, like, oh, the Cincinnati Bengals have been giving it up to everybody, and so therefore
I have to play Lamar.
I can't tell which of those narratives is going to take over.
I cannot wait to see the rostership percentages on these slates. So
I think the answer, though, is probably somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And it's kind of how I'm going to treat this. Like, I want a Lamar Jackson lineup, but I want to build it in a specific way. But I'm not going to I'm not going to sit here and pound the table and say Jackson has to be in every lineup this week. I totally understand the hesitation there. I think that it's just one of those things that, like, if you are paying for a subscription service that gives you rostership percentages and projects those for you, and you see that Jackson is going to be low percentage rostered, I'm playing him.
Building a lineup.
That's kind of where I'm at. So if I start to, like, get a sense that that Jackson's going to be low rostered, I'll play him. If I think he's going to be chalked, then I'm more likely to pivot off of him this week. It really comes down to that. But I feel like there's going to be a sense where it's like, it's Lamar Jackson and it's Joe Burrow. And people are going to want to play those two dudes, even though there's no evidence suggesting you probably should.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that there are those 7 max entry contests. I'm probably going to build one lineup for each quarterback because it's who I am, and I'll have a Lamar lineup, but I'll begrudgingly. And then because it's me, that'll be my highest scoring lineup of the week. So I'll have to grin and bear it. But let's get to the man of the hour. Probably the whole reason people are tuning into this show. Of all the quarterbacks we've mentioned, there's only one anybody has real questions about, and that is Joe Burrow likely making his return on Thanksgiving, or probably, I think it's confirmed, making his return on Thanksgiving. However, Austin, we haven't got to this part of the show yet. He will not have T. Higgins. So there are Joe Burrow issues. That's a fun misstep on his name there. Joe Burrow issues to consider against the Baltimore defense that's played better as of late.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I feel like, again, this is like a situation where I could see people telling 2 different stories. I could see them saying, Joe Burrow's back. We could play Joe Burrow this week. I want to play him. I could also see people saying, don't play Joe Burrow this week. It's his first game back. Are we sure he's healthy? How is he going to look? It's the Baltimore Ravens. And it kind of like depending on what side of that coin that it seems like people are going to land, I'll either play him or not based on that. I think in general, the quarterbacks are going to be at least somewhat popular in this slate, because I think there's enough of a negative narrative around Jordan Love and Jared Goff that these 2 guys are probably going to slot in just above them, because people are going to say, oh, but it's Lamar Jackson. And because of that, I'm actually very intrigued by pivoting to the running backs this week. In particular, I think Derrick Henry is in a really good spot here. I will say, I don't mind playing this where I have both Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. I think that's going to be something that people don't want to do, but it's again one of those things that's viable in this context. But the Bengals, they've been actually getting a little bit better over the past couple of weeks against opposing receivers. They've only allowed about 26 points per game to receivers since week 8.
Oh, and they killed the slate on week 12. The amount of lineups that had to have had some version of Stephon Diggs or Kayshon Boutte that went up in flames because the Bengals decided to play defense.
Yeah, exactly. Now they still are getting beat by the tight ends, which we'll get to in a second, but they're also getting beat by running backs. They let Derrick Henry get there, and they've been averaging 30 points allowed per game or not Derrick Henry. They allowed Trayvon Henderson to do pretty well last week. and they've been allowing about 30 points per game to running backs over the past 4 weeks. So I am very interested in Derrick Henry. And I think, again, if we get that situation where Emmanuel Wilson is the starter and a lot of people play that Gibbs Wilson stack again, Derrick Henry then becomes very interesting and contrarian, which is a reason that I like pivoting off the quarterbacks into the running backs for this slate or for this game.
Yeah, I think it's a good call. You got to get your running backs from somewhere, and we are talking two of the teams that have struggled against running backs. Baltimore, again, improving, and as you pointed out, Cincinnati mildly improving, but Travion Henderson wasn't terrible last week. It's just we made this joke all throughout the show. Where was Cincinnati going to get beat? It turns out tight end was the answer to that question, and we will talk about that in a second. But Austin, if everybody's worried about the Kansas City Dallas pass catchers, there's one name sticking out like a sore thumb in this game. You get Ja'Marr Chase back after a 1 week suspension, but you lose T. Higgins. If that doesn't open it up to Ja'Marr Chase with 25 targets this week, I don't know what will. And my goodness, did you find some very fun Ja'Marr Chase against Baltimore stats?
Yeah, so last year against the Baltimore Ravens and the 2 games that they played, Ja'Marr Chase went 10 catches on 12 targets for 193 yards and 2 touchdowns in his first game against them. In his second game against them, he went 11 catches on 17 targets, 264 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
That's almost 500 yards and 5 touchdowns in 2 games, folks. If that doesn't, Austin, the second I saw this stat, I'm going to announce a lineup after we finish this up. The second I saw this stat, I'm like, Ja'Marr Chase has to be in every lineup. I'm sorry. Like we joked about Jahmyr Gibbs being in every lineup. Ja'Marr Chase is that at an $800 discount. I don't foresee myself building a lineup this week in the Millie Maker, at least, that does not have Ja'Marr Chase in it. It just seems like a fool's errand at this point.
Yeah, that's fair. You should have one that doesn't have Chase in there. I would just
we both know I'm not going to do that. And what I mean by that, for those who've never watched this show, when I say I'm not going to do it, I mean I'm not going to listen to Austin, because I'm a person who I have to do things 100% because I'm a moron. And so I'm going to go very heavily on Ja'Marr Chase and go down with that ship. But I understand now, Austin. I have become a better DFS player because of you. I probably will not have Ja'Marr Chase in all of my lineups this week. So.
That's good. I think you learned your lesson after going 100% rostered on A.T. Perry and Best Ball last year.
My guy didn't even finish the season on a team.
But I do think Ja'Marr Chase is in a really, really good spot. Just his history against the Baltimore Ravens. Now he has had some dud games, so I think it is worth saying there is some floor there. My guess is that has to do with oh gosh, what is the cornerback for the Ravens that has been there forever?
Yeah, I can't think of the name right now.
I can't think of the name right now, but
there's who you're talking about.
There's a cornerback for this team that I do think has the ability to shut down, or at least historically has had the ability to shut down Ja'Marr Chase. The question is he still rostered for this team? Either way, I think that most likely you are going to want to play Ja'Marr Chase in your lineup this week and just not even really think about it.
I think you're probably thinking Marlon Humphrey. He is now listed as their nickelback. So
there we go. Marlon Humphrey. So if, I think my guess is that the games where Ja'Marr Chase has not done well, he's had Marlon Humphrey covering him. But the way that this offense works, they're going to get him off of Humphrey. They'll get him off of Kyle Hamilton. They're going to make it hard for them to cover Chase. And I think he can still easily get there.
Yeah. Before we move on, Austin, I feel like we're 2 players we still need to talk about in these wide receivers. Zay Flowers is the number 1 for the Baltimore Ravens. And while Cincinnati has gotten better, if you're going Lamar, does Zay Flowers need to be involved, or does the tight end position that we'll talk about next kind of alleviate having to get Zay Flowers into your lineup?
I don't think you have to force in a receiver stack with Lamar Jackson. It's the New England Patriots play last week. If you had played Drake May, Travion Henderson, and Hunter Henry, your lineup would have been doing just fine. I tried getting a little cute and going extra with Kayshon Boutte in a lineup with Drake May last week, and it didn't work out. So I think it's okay to run the same play this week. Again, like the nature of these smaller contests in general, like you're predicting one game, and so there is going to be a lot more variance. So of course there's a world where Zay Flowers gets there, and I'm not saying don't play him, but he's not somebody that I'm like, I need to play him more often than the rest of the field is going to play him. I think it's fine to throw him in there, but I'm not personally going overboard.
Yeah, it took him some time last week, but Andre Yoshivas did decent in relief of Jahmyr Chase. Now he just slides over, and now he's in relief of T. Higgins. So he's still playing on the outside. He has his same role. 7 targets last week. I think when I'm looking at $4,000 wide receivers, Austin, I think Andre Yoshivas jumps off the screen at me. But Mitchell Tinsley, when everybody got hurt last week, scores the touchdown and has himself a nice little game, and he's only 3,500.
Yeah, so I think you can go with either of them, although I do think Yoshivas is in a good spot here. I don't have the data to back this up, but I have this feeling that he does better when it's Jahmyr Chase and Yoshivas than when it's Higgins and Yoshivas. Now, I would love to actually know the stats on that, but my vague memory says that this is actually a really good spot for Yoshivas.
Yeah, that would be a fun one. I'll be interested to see if I can find the numbers on that later, but I'm not going to try to do it on this show. Austin, as we move on, as we've alluded to this entire segment, Hunter Henry was the play against the Bengals last week. Mark Andrews comes into this $1,400 cheaper than Travis Kelce because he hasn't been nearly as consistent as Kelce. But when you look at this slate breaks pretty evenly into high-priced tight ends, mid-priced tight ends, and dirt cheap tight ends. Mark Andrews is the king of that mid-price, and in this matchup, it feels like he's probably the one you want to go with.
He probably is, and my guess is that he is probably he is likely to be the most roster tight end on the slate. So that's something that I am considering with this. But for just the stats side of it, the Cincinnati Bengals over the past 4 weeks have allowed 26.7 points per game to the tight end position. Baltimore, as you mentioned, they have a 29-30 point implied team total. So it's a really good situation for Mark Andrews. Yeah. The thing that I'm most interested in here is to look towards Isaiah Likely, because we haven't seen an Isaiah Likely game this year. We know he has the ability to do it, but we haven't seen really any games with both Lamar Jackson and Isaiah Likely in them together. Likely was hurt for the first 3 games of the year. He comes back. Lamar Jackson gets hurt and has missed most of the season up until this point. They had their 1 game back this past week, but again, Jackson still clearly hurt coming back off of that injury. And so maybe he's feeling a little bit better on Thursday, and maybe Likely is a good pivot off of Mark Andrews. So, maybe I think you're just going to have to make a decision in your lineup. Do you want to just take the chalk and hit Mark Andrews and then worry about getting different elsewhere? I'm totally fine with that. And of course, there will be lineups where I do that. I will look at Travis Kelce as a way to pivot off of Andrews, because I could see Andrews being 40% or 40 or 50% rostered and Kelce being 20-30% rostered. Like it's enough of a difference that it matters. Like, and I should say that here, like this is one of the things we didn't talk about up top. You're not going to get players that are 5% rostered more likely than not in this match.
Unless you're getting really weird, and it's probably not worth it.
Exactly. Like every player you're probably going to get, it's going to be 10, 15, 20% rostered, because there's just not that many players to pick from. And that's why I emphasize like getting different by how you are building your roster in terms of the number of players from specific teams or particular or single games that you're willing to put into a lineup. But one way you can pivot off of the chalk is pivoting off of Andrews and getting onto Isaiah Likely.
And then the last thing I kind of want to mention is we saw Mike Gesicki return last week, immediately leads the tight ends and targets, makes Noah Fant an afterthought. So I was going to bring him up. But what I really want to ask you as we wrap up the offense on this section is, are any of the trends we saw with Joe Flacco going to hold with Joe Burrow? Joe Flacco was loving the tight end, and Joe Flacco for 4 weeks was loving Noah Fant. Joe Flacco immediately goes to Mike Gesicki. Can we just, and I'm not putting you on the spot here, but can we expect that Joe Burrow just comes in and is loving on the tight end? I suppose T. Higgins being out is going to help that. And if all of those things come true, I think Kyle Hamilton got hurt last week for Baltimore as well. That makes Mike Gesicki a more interesting play.
Yeah, well, I think the thing to your point that really actually plays in Mike Gesicki's favor here is not necessarily just what we saw with Joe Burrow last week, or with Joe Flacco last week.
Yeah.
But what we saw with Joe Burrow last season, we saw him have games where he really got a lot of targets and usage with Joe Burrow in the lineup. Like he had a 100-yard game with Burrow under center. Against the Baltimore Ravens last season, he had a 9-target game. So I do think that we can translate what happened with Gesicki last week to what will happen with Joe Burrow under center this week, I think he's an interesting pivot play as well. Again, I think Mark Andrews is likely to be more targeted or more rostered in these matchups. But Gesicki, we've seen that when either Higgins or Chase are out of the lineup, they like to go to Mike Gesicki, just like they like to go to Andre Yoshivas. And so I think it's a totally fine play.
And then as we wrap this thing up with the defense, we finally see the Bengals show up last week against the Patriots. Austin, I cannot find myself betting on that again, but I am more than willing to bet on this Baltimore defense. They are high priced. They may be the most expensive defense out. They're second most expensive defense on the slate. However, I firmly believe that Joe Burrow has a sack problem, and Joe Burrow is also prone to some turnovers. Baltimore is a defense that I think folks are going to avoid because it's the Bengals, and I think that makes them a very interesting contrarian play this week.
Oh, that's interesting because I was going to say I think that they are going to be highly rostered this week.
Oh, really? Okay, so I may just be and I'll always Austin gets, I don't want to say mad when I do this, but Austin's the expert here, folks. If you think they're going to be rostered, I just think people are going to be afraid to play them against the Bengals. So.
I do think that's fair. That's a really good point. I'll be interested to see how it actually plays out. Like that's the thing about DFS. We're trying to predict here how people are going to behave, and we whiff at times. I do think that because of the spread, people will be more willing to play Baltimore, though.
That's a good point. 8-point favorite.
Yeah, and they're now down to, by the way, a 6.5-point favorite. That might have happened like as we were recording.
Yeah, I pull mine from a really weird site that does all the implied totals for me, so I doubt it's ever the most up to date when I pull these numbers. So.
It's all good. So they're at 6.5 points spread now, but still, like Baltimore is firmly favored in this matchup. And so I could see, because of the fact that Burrow takes sacks, he might give up an interception, that I could see Baltimore's defense being pretty well rostered. But to your point, the Bengals are going to be, I think, probably the most lowly rostered defense on the slate, if I had to guess, which inclines me to play them one place, but I don't think I need to get that dirty with my defense. I feel like I can go to that Green Bay, Detroit Lions, or the Kansas City situation, go to basically any of the other defenses and get different enough to be off of Baltimore or Green Bay to get some variety there. But if you're like just purely chasing like the lowest roster percentage, Cincinnati Bengals are a sure thing.
Yep. Austin, just to wrap this show up, and I don't want us going too much over an hour, I put in our show sheet just the very first lineup I built. And the first thing that's kind of jumping out at me that I noticed is I went with the Kansas City stack, but I actually don't have a Dallas bringback. I already have ideas of how to get a Dallas bringback. So I'm just going to read this lineup off, and you can just kind of tell me, I'll explain my thought process or what I may have done right or wrong here. So I went with Mahomes, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Kareem Hunt, Rashee Rice, Jameson Williams, Andre Yoshibas, Travis Kelce, Christian Watson, Baltimore defense. Literally not a surprise into this. As I'm looking at it now after doing an hour show with you, it feels far too chalky, and I feel silly for not having a bringback. My idea is I'm going to keep this lineup together because it's $5, but I'm also going to probably do a new lineup right when we get off the show while it's fresh in my brain, where I'm going to kill Gibbs and JMO, get CeeDee Lamb in there, and maybe find just one of the pivot running backs, whatever fits. So,
yeah, I think that's a good thought. And actually, when I looked at, because you gave me the full screenshot, I could see how much salary you had left over. It actually reminded me of something I didn't talk about at the top of the show.
Yeah,
you should feel comfortable leaving some salary on the table this week.
Yes, just like in a showdown. Find your favorite 7 players in the showdown or whatever. Don't feel like you need to spend every dollar. So.
Exactly. And that's another way that it's going to make it easier for you to get a different lineup, because people are going to say, I have to use all my salary. I have to use all my salary. I have to use all my salary. And it's going to force them into certain picks. But if you say, I'm going to leave $1,000 on the table, you're automatically getting different than a decent amount.
Nobody has that lineup. Nobody has that lineup. So.
Yeah, so just feel a little comfortable with that. And while we're giving lineups, I'll give my first lineup that I'm looking at this week. Yeah. So I talked about the Green Bay side. I have a lineup where I've got Jordan Love, Christian Watson, and Dontavian Wicks.
Okay.
A little double stack there. At running back, I have Kareem Hunt, as you do too, and Derrick Henry. And then my other receivers, I've got Rashee Rice and Ja'Marr Chase. I've got Mark Andrews at tight end and the Kansas City Chiefs defense.
Well, I like yours way better than mine right off the rip, just from doing this show together. I mean, I love my lineup. I didn't like not having a bring back. Like that's, I guess, my completely independent lineup. My next 3 or 4 lineups will tell the story. So
yeah, there you go.
Well, that's it. I want to get us out of here under an hour. We appreciate you folks giving us their time. We hope you have a great holiday. You're probably listening to this on Wednesday. We will still have a main slate show coming out for DFS Academy. So I'll just remind you, if you want to play DFS with us, check the links in the description of this video. We probably will not have a Thursday slate. We will have a main slate going. We do a little $2 contest on FanDuel and DraftKings. We also have a Discord. Follow Austin at Austin _ FFL. Follow me at the Fantasy 5. Follow Club Fantasy at Club Fantasy FFL. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, girls, for tuning in. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you later on this week.